Yeah, they were talking about how when the tractor itself was invented, people talked about how like, oh my gosh, it's taking away so much of the human
Hmm.
aspect of farming, and but at the end of the day, somebody has to drive the tractor, so you're not really taking all of the humans out of the equation. And the picture that they kind of painted in this video is that this tractor is an evolution of that, and it's not
Hmm.
that the farmer is doing nothing. At the very least, you're monitoring this robot. Like
Right.
you're monitor if you have three of them, they sort of painted this picture of like you could be plowing this one field with your like the tractor that you're driving, but you have two others, one of which is like watering the crops in another part of the field, and another one is like spraying the dangerous pesticides
Hmm.
that and this was a really good point that like now you don't have to have somebody driving that tractor with the dangerous chemicals.
Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black, and in today's episode, we're talking all about one of my favorite topics of all time, automation in agriculture. To help me talk about this topic, I have an old guest that has come on and talked about a few different things before, anything ranging from dinosaurs to robots. And because of that topic, he's a pretty well in the ballpark of what we're going to be talking about today. That would be Lou, of course. Lou, go ahead and introduce yourself to the crowd once again.
Hey everybody, my name is Lou. I host a podcast called Robots versus Dinosaurs, which I like to describe as a science fiction, philosophy, and comedy podcast. We talk about movies mostly that feature robots and dinosaurs. So Brendan, you've been a guest on my show before, and we've talked about a dinosaur movie and a robot movie. And yeah, I'm excited today to talk about automation and robots in the real world.
Yeah, definitely. So this topic first actually got brought up on this show a while ago. Now it's been almost 2 years since the first time we talked about automation in agriculture. And in the first episode I ever talked about this, I jokingly said that it's not just as simple as you have Wally going in between trees picking oranges, as cool as that would be. But we do have a decent amount of automation in agriculture that is somewhat similar to what we're seeing in some of these movies about robots. So I think that the before we get started, I'm kind of just curious. So I had you watch a video that we actually covered on a previous episode of this show. First of all, what'd you think of the video? And second of all, before watching the video, what were your perceptions about automation in agriculture and robotics in agriculture?
Yeah, so I watched the video about the Monarch tractor, the automated tractor that seems so futuristic and cool. And I was surprised at the end when they were talking about like when is this going to be available?
Hmm.
And it dawned on me, and they said it out loud that all of the footage that they had shown of the tractor was real footage. And they pointed out that with a lot of times with speculative technology, with companies that are developing prototypes and selling them, for use in the real world, they'll use these like CG models or CG videos of the models in action or of the thing in action. And I realized, yeah, oh my gosh, they've been showing me real footage of this thing this whole time, actually out in the field, actually interacting with people. So I thought that was like, I was really blown away when they said it's available this year. This is something that exists right now. Like you can buy this and have this on your farm immediately if you can afford to. Yeah, it was really fascinating.
Yeah, and did you before seeing the video, did you know that this kind of technology was being used in ag today, or was this kind of like a new experience for you?
I really didn't. It's when you say, they can't do anything as sophisticated as picking oranges. It's not Wally going into your orange trees and picking the oranges off of them. It's. I will say I don't know what exactly I was imagining, like to what degree a farm could be automated, but I do think somewhere in my head I had a vague image of it like literally picking the crops and putting them in a basket or something like a bin on its back or something like that. And I'm glad I watched this video because I realized it did dispel a few of my preconceived notions,
Mhm.
that I did kind of maybe overestimate a little bit, like how sophisticated it would be. But the things that it can do, I'm glad that like my super futuristic, my very unrealistic notions were dispelled, because the things that it can do are super impressive anyway.
Mm.
And I'm excited to talk about like some of the things this tractor can actually do that I wouldn't have thought about them, because I was thinking a little too sci-fi about it. I was thinking a little too Wally about it.
Yeah, no, we're not quite there yet in terms of the, more advanced robotics and technology, but we're getting there. We're actually kind of what I always like to say, we're in a unique position as a generation because we're getting to watch a new revolution of agriculture happen right before our eyes.
Mm.
And I don't think we talked about the revolutions of agriculture in the last episode I had you on for. I talked about them a pretty decent amount. There's something I'm really interested and excited about. So I'll give you another brief explanation. Basically, the first revolution of agriculture was the like invention of agriculture. It was the
Mm.
movement from hunting and gathering to cultivating crops in a domestic way. Um, and then like we didn't have a second generation for like years. That was like kind of the invention of more modern tools. So like tractors are kind of in that category, but they're like late second revolution. Early second revolution was like the first plow, a lot of like earlier like farm tools that we see today on like the larger scale, and then tractors kind of came in later. um, the third revolution actually just happened during the 1950s, I want to say. It was like early, or I would say mid 20th century. Um, in the third revolution is also known as the Green Revolution. That was the introduction to like chemical pesticides and fertilizers, and like a lot more like chemical type ingredients were added to our farming practices. And then now we're getting into this new revolution. So I kind of like to say that we're in the middle of a fourth and fifth revolution that are happening almost simultaneously but separately from each other. The fourth revolution I always like to say is the automation revolution. That's the one we're talking about today. It's one that takes agricultural technology that we've known about for years. We've had tractors for a while now, and we've had other technology like this for a while now, irrigation systems and sprinklers and all kinds of stuff like that, and we're expanding it into something so much more than we ever thought it could be. So in that category, we have self-driving tractors, we have drones, we have precision agriculture, we have cow Fitbits is a whole thing that we can go into, milking machines. Like there's so much added to this. It's like, that look on your face is that kind of reaction. It's like, I never would have thought that would be a thing, but it makes sense that it's a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Wait, can you tell me a little more about cow Fitbits? I don't want you to just breeze past that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of my favorite ones, which is why I threw it in here. So cow Fitbits come in a few different forms. They can be a collar around their neck. They can have an actual like watch style thing around their leg, or they can have an ear tag that connects to a system. And basically all three of these function very similarly, which is they track the number of steps that cow takes, the amount of water it intakes, the temperature and heart rate of that cow, the amount of activity it had that day, if it's eating properly, if it's sick, if it's pregnant, all that kind of stuff. So whenever it comes in to get milked, they monitor all that, and if it's not as usual as it should be, they try to figure out why. So basically it helps mitigate illnesses in cattle that we would not be able to properly see until it was too late. So like the cow might have some kind of cold or bug that's going around that we don't catch until they're already about to die. So this kind of helps mitigate a lot of that issue. And it's the technology for it's advanced quite a lot. Like it used to be very primitive, like these massive bulky collars that just kind of weighed the cow down, and they didn't really like them very much, and the readings on them were just kind of accurate. We've got it really really down pack now, so especially with the ear tag ones, because now we have these scanners that connect straight to our phones. We can just scan the ear tag and it tells us all the information right there. We don't even have to punch it into the database or anything. It just sends it all for us. So it's gotten very advanced.
That's amazing. So would you say that all of the farming revolutions that have happened are like inspired by, or maybe like a result of some new technology, some new piece of equipment that's introduced to the world at large, but like farming finds a use for it, and that changes everything?
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry, my throat's been having issues all morning. But yeah, no, that's definitely the case. Man. That's definitely the case. It seems like whenever a new revolution of agriculture comes out, it has something to do with a new technology, a new practice, some kind of new innovation that, like you said, is introduced to the world at large, but agriculture finds a way to make it unique to their practice. And we've had technologies introduced in the past that haven't created a new revolution, but it tends to be the case that if a new technology comes in that completely changes how at least some level of the industry functions, then it becomes a new revolution. So we had like the green revolution where we had chemical pesticides and fertilizers introduced. Did every farm adapt to those? No, not necessarily. We have plenty of farms that don't use those, but enough farms did start using those that it became a revolution. It changed so much of the industry that there was a new category of job in that industry that required, to exist to be able to supplement that degree of the industry's evolution. So with the automation revolution, there's been a lot of new technology that's kind of caused this massive boom of change in the agricultural field. So you have like drones were a big part of that. That was like a really early development in automation agriculture, and like the cow Fitbits were another thing that came pretty early on. And like a lot of these technologies are things that we talk about now, and they're so much more well refined now. But when they first were introduced, and like this happened probably a couple of decades ago, I would say, they were kind of flying under everyone's radar. Nobody really knew they were happening, and almost it's for the best because they were so primitive and so bulky and so inefficient compared to what we have now that they really didn't serve a proper purpose in an automated agricultural world. Now they flow just as smoothly as technology we see in our own lives. Self-driving cars, and we have drones that can record and fly 300 miles an hour, whatever it is. Like we have like extremely advanced technology that can do crazy things, and it's being used on the farm in ways that we don't even imagine it being used here. To give you an example of one of my favorite, instances of this is, using those drones in precision agriculture, we can actually have a drone fly over a field, and it does a massive scan. It can detect heat signatures to tell where all the bugs are at, where they need to be sprayed. It can detect moisture levels in the soil and tell, which crops are getting watered properly and which ones need more water or getting too much water. It can tell what the like nutrient composition is of the soil to tell you like if the crops are going to grow properly in this area. Like the amount of precision we've gotten down to is really, for one, it's amazing, but for two, it's exactly what agriculture has needed over the past few years, because we're getting to a point now where we're in desperate need of an ability to grow food without wasting resources, because we don't have very many resources to waste. And as the population rises, the amount of food we're going to have to produce is going to go up too. And we really need to be able to grow food as efficiently as possible. And we really can't do that now without our new technology that we've been developing.
How is a drone flying overhead able to tell you the like density of the soil and nutrients in it without like taking a sample of the soil?
So the drone mostly is there to monitor like not microbial what you call it, like living organism activity. So that's more on like the pest side of things. But we do have like scanners and monitors in the soil that can detect that stuff and shoot it up to the drone, and that kind of gives a whole. So precision ag is more than just like one piece of technology that's monitoring all of it. It's more like you have a bunch of moving parts that all work together, and then they all talk to each other and kind of get a full picture of what's going on.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's another like way that I wasn't thinking about. I was thinking of like a robot that does it all. Like it has arms that can grab things, and it like does all of the functions. I wasn't thinking of like the symbiosis between different parts of it, sensors that you have. Because one thing that they mentioned in this video that I thought that was exactly what you're talking about, like. That dispels the crazy sci-fi way I'm thinking about it, and it is still a crazy sci-fi thing. They were talking about like a vineyard, and how the tractor can be like going in between the lanes. They call them lanes in the vineyard. But there are, if you build sensors up to a certain height, or I don't know if they were talking about sensors, but like something that recharges the battery, or like not recharges it, lets it basically run on sort of like a bumper car, like on an electric track, or like an electric subway car. Like it basically, if they said the farms of the future will have these things where like they're built at a certain height so that the tractor can go through and not use up its battery power, and just having all of those things around your farm, in addition to that, support the robot tractor, is really how it would all work together. And I just think that's so cool, and like could be I could see how like revolution is the right word to use for how this technology will change everything in farming.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a big thing that like I really appreciated about the videos. They really captured the idea of, technology in agriculture is not a one size fits all solution. And that's it has to be the case because agriculture is such a diverse industry that has so many different things that could go wrong. Because for one, it's
Mm,
dealing with the environment, and for two, even if the environment was a consistent factor that didn't change, every crop, every animal, every style of growing is going to be so different, and the soil is going to be so different that you can't just have one piece of technology that can do all of it. You have to have a lot of a lot of pieces to the team that are all working together to make sure that that product gets grown to the maximum efficiency and to the best product quality it can be. So the a good example of that would be in the video they talked about agrivoltaics. This whole idea that
mm,
you can grow food based off of the amount of energy you can produce, and that you can use electricity to power your farms, and that electricity can come from how the food is grown. Like there's a whole like symbiotic relationship happening between like solar energy and crop growth, and like in the video they used the example of having solar panels that could basically monitor the amount of light that the crops are getting, and then move to protect the crops from getting oversaturated light, and then collecting the rest of it to use to power the farm. It's a
mm.
very, very new idea. That's kind of one of the newer technologies in like ag, the automation revolution in ag. It's one that I'm kind of excited to see how that turns out. And just in general, the use of renewable energy is kind of something that's being played with a lot right now in ag. They're figuring out how to take methane from cows, and like whenever cows produce manure, they take the methane from it, and they can actually convert that methane into a usable energy source. So
Mm.
there's a lot of innovation right now in converting what we would usually consider a useless or wasted product and turning it into some kind of energy source that we can use to power something else. So our ultimate goal right now with this whole automation revolution is to try to get the farm as self-sufficient as possible. And disclaimer, I mean, this is a big thing. Like a lot of people when they hear me say this are like, oh, so they're just trying to make it so farms can run themselves, so we don't need farmers anymore, or so farmers don't have to do as much anymore. Not at all the case. It sounds like that, and I understand where they're coming from with that, but you can never properly remove humans from agriculture just because of how
Mm.
inconsistent it is. You can never properly assess every possible variable. And at the end of the day, agriculture is still a business. You still have to have some level of economic factor involved as well. So you're going to have humans involved to some degree. The automation is not there to, because farmers are lazy and they don't want to do the work. It's not there because the farmers are trying to, take more off their plate. It's more so, have you ever played the game Stardew Valley?
No.
Okay. So in that game, it's very, you have a small farm, but the trick of the game is like for the first like year of the game, you're trying to figure out how to run your farm and go talk to the city people and go to the mines and go mining for ores, and like trying to manage all of that. But also you only have a limited amount of energy and you have a limited amount of time. And as it
Mm.
gets later in the day, you will pass out if you work yourself too hard. So it's
Okay, it sounds like Harvest Moon.
it is a lot like Harvest Moon. Yeah, it's based off of Harvest Moon. So
Okay, okay.
it's that similar idea of like you have to try to balance your tasks for the day with your energy level and with the amount of time that you have. And farmers do that on a daily basis. That's one of the most
Hmm.
accurate parts of Harvest Moon is that it accurately portrays the too many things to do and not enough time to do it mentality of agriculture. And so this automation, the biggest advantage to it is it gives farmers that time to do some of the other stuff that they don't have time to work on. So it's not like it's we're going to have massive self-running farms. It's more like, okay, that
Yeah.
massive part of the farm that we would usually have to worry about is taken care of. So now we can worry about this other massive part of the farm.
Yeah, they were talking about how when the tractor itself was invented, people talked about how like, oh my gosh, it's taking away so much of the human
Mm-hmm.
aspect of farming, and but at the end of the day, somebody has to drive the tractor, so you're not really taking all of the humans out of the equation. And the picture that they kind of painted in this video is that this tractor is an evolution of that, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
that the farmer is doing nothing. At the very least, you're monitoring this robot. Like
Right.
you're if you have three of them, they sort of painted this picture of like you could be plowing this one field with your like the tractor that you're driving, but you have two others, one of which is like watering the crops in another part of the field, and another one is like spraying the dangerous pesticides
Mm-hmm.
that And this was a really good point that like now you don't have to have somebody driving that tractor with the dangerous chemicals in what I assume, and I've never really thought about this before, so maybe this is one of my questions. That tractor driver would otherwise have to be in some sort of protective gear, or like driving it in a way that they're minimizing the exposure of those chemicals to themselves, which might overall reduce the efficiency of the whole entire endeavor. So like the fact that you could be doing one thing on one acre of your farm, and then another acre is taken care of by another automated tractor, and you have an app where you can monitor its progress. Or like frankly, the thing that they kind of didn't talk about as much, because of course they're trying to sell this tractor, is that it's going to break down. Like it's going to run into problems, it's going to get stuck in mud, or there's going to be something that the tractor runs into that like a human driver could have avoided, but because it's automated, it didn't see it coming and it got stuck. And it's going to need a human to come and intervene in some way, or rescue it in some way, and get it back to functionality, to get it operational again. So yeah, there's no way I'd say not in our lifetime. There's no way we're going to see like an entire farm where the farmer is just sitting in a room like pressing buttons and viewing monitors. Like they're
Right.
going to still be doing something. They're going to
Yeah.
it's a symbiosis rather than a replacement, right?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. And it goes back to that original idea, right? Of everything on a farm has to be communicating, working together for the farm to function properly. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily that the farmer is, just going to sit back and watch necessarily. It's more so he's adding more members to his team that he's going to have to talk to and work with. And it just so happens that they're robotic.
Mm-hmm.
But like you mentioned, in the video, they talk about that idea of, even though you won't have, somebody driving this tractor, you're still going to have somebody operating it behind the scenes with a remote of some kind. Maybe they can operate more than one tractor at once, which would cut down labor costs. And we're having a massive labor shortage right now in agriculture. So that would be basically a miracle of, of an invention if they could do that. And one of the biggest things that I've seen as well, in addition to what you mentioned about people being concerned about, taking the farmer, taking the human out of the agriculture, is that like a lot of people have been concerned about, as we create more automation in agriculture, we're taking jobs away from people. That they're saying like, well, if you take the driver out of the tractor, then what are we going to do with all of our tractor drivers? And where they're not going to have jobs. It's like, for one, there are a lot of jobs on the farm. They can find something else to do. For
Right.
two, like it's not as simple as like their only job is to drive that tractor. There's plenty of other work for them to do. For two, they can still drive the tractor. They're just going to be driving 3 other tractors using a controller now. Like it's going to be, their job's just going to be moved to a different position. And for 3, like I mentioned, we are having a massive shortage of jobs. So it's not necessarily like we have an overabundance of employees and we're not going to have anywhere to put them. It's more like we need more people to do this stuff. And since we can't find them, we're upgrading the technology to take over our lack of help. And then we also have the whole idea of, now we have a market that is encouraging people to get jobs in technology, in invention and innovation and all that kind of stuff, because this is kind of the connection that I always like to use, because this connects agriculture to like the non-agricultural areas, because now we have an opportunity for computer scientists, for engineers, for all kinds of new career choices to go into agriculture instead of other typical technology based companies that they would go into, which are way more competitive and they're going to have a hard time finding. You could be an engineer for Tesla and hope that you get that job, and then hope that you're even close to on their level, or you can go build autonomous tractors for this farmer over here who desperately needs your help. So it creates a whole new market for jobs. It creates a whole new relationship between the producer and the consumer. And at the end of the day, I mean, when we invented the tractor, that took a lot of jobs away from people who were just, pushing plows by hand. So, I mean, I think that we're always going to have that position of, as technology advances, jobs are going to be lost, but that requires everyone in the society to advance to a new level of understanding, is that way they can accommodate to new jobs that are going to be created.
It kind of changes the culture, like in a lot of ways too, because it's like you only think about people going to work on a farm if they kind of either they grew up on a farm themselves, like it's in their family, or if they live somewhere very rural that has farmland, and it attracts or provides a lot of the labor in that region, so it attracts like people to work on a farm. But like, yeah, it like to your point, there are people that coming in from other sectors of the labor force, like people that their entire skill set is technology, maybe troubleshooting, like working on electronics, programming, coding, and that they could be exposed to this whole other world of farming and interact with people that they never really interacted with before, because it seems like a completely different field. And yeah, it'll completely change the culture. How long do you think until there are like country songs about my electric tractor done run out of juice, um, the sun went down and my tractor don't run. Uh,
Yeah, I think it's still gonna be a little while before the country music scene catches up with that.
yeah,
Unfortunately, that's a whole other topic, but unfortunately, country music's not quite as connected to the farm as it used to be.
yeah. It's even now. It's really not
Mhm.
right. It's more pop. I
Right,
mean,
it
this
is.
we're not here to review country music, but like that is a good point that like even now we're kind of already it is kind of absurd to be resistant to this technology and like solar panels and like this type of technology when we're already at a point where like things are so revolutionized by
Mhm.
technology. Things are so advanced. A lot of things are automated. How many farmers right now use like a hose or the equivalent of a hose to water their crops and don't have some sort of sprinkler system, right?
Right.
Like, is that even a thing?
I mean, unless you're growing a really small garden, I don't see that happening very often. Or unless like a sprinkler breaks and you need to run a hose over to that small area. But more often than not, yeah, they have some kind of irrigation setup. They have a water
Mm-hmm.
truck going out there if absolutely necessary. Like they have way more efficient ways of watering their crops than dragging a garden hose out there and just doing it one by one.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, it's absolutely true. I mean, as we're seeing this technology advance and as we're seeing methods improve and just the general culture around agriculture expand, we're starting to see this kind of change, and this is why I call it a revolution. We're seeing this massive shift in how we view growing food as a society. I mean, not just from the agricultural perspective, but for consumers who understand what this technology is doing, they have this better appreciation of, oh, farming is not as primitive as I thought it was. A lot of people have
Hmm.
this idea that farming is so simple that it's just one guy going out there and he milks one cow with a pail and he has a cornfield and like that's it. And when you show them that this farmer over here, he doesn't look anything like that. He doesn't wear overalls. He's wearing a plaid button up, and he's wearing like a nice suit, and he's operating a tractor using his iPad, or
Mm-hmm.
he's watering his crop, sure, but he's doing it using irrigation that reaches farther than you can see, or he's not just milking one cow with a pail, he's milking hundreds of cows using a robot that can do it way better than he can and makes the cows feel better about themselves. And so there's like when you start to introduce people to that idea, they start to realize that agriculture is not this rural like laid back lifestyle. It's actually a lot more advanced than that, and it's actually agriculture is keeping up with our technology in the more what I don't mean to say civilized, what's the word I'm looking for, more urban lifestyle. But not only is it keeping up with it, it's actually in some ways advancing past what we have in urban technology at the moment.
That's good. Yeah, they talked about how designing the AI protocols and everything for the tractor it's more challenging in some ways than designing AI for a self-driving car that's going to be on a road,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to think about like the uneven terrain of like a hill that just has more dirt piled up here, has like rocks and gravel that it might run into, or like just I mean, well, a car on the road has to worry about this too. But they talked about like a fox jumping out of a bush,
Mm-hmm.
and how it might have to also like it operates on much narrower lanes, because they said this thing is only like 3 feet wide. Basically, it's like
Yeah.
1.1 meters wide, which yeah, it's incredibly small. But it kind of needs to be right. Like, how wide is a crop field usually?
Well, it depends on what crop you're growing. So
Mm,
the Monarch tractors are mostly used in vineyards right now because the inventor is from kind of like that vineyard area.
Okay.
He mostly operates in a lot of like grape based industries, so it makes sense to have a smaller tractor for vineyards because they have one of the most narrow lanes of most crops.
Mm.
If you're going for more like trees, if you have like oranges or walnuts or pistachios or anything in that regard, their lane's going to be a bit wider. I would say, I don't know what the actual. I think it depends on the operation, but they kind of have different lane sizes depending on the crop and depending on how they want to irrigate and all that kind of stuff. I believe for like tree nuts, it's like I want to say 10 feet or something like that, 10 or 15 feet in distance between each lane. I could be completely wrong on that. I'll have to look it up.
Hmm.
But that would require a tractor that's not quite as narrow. You wouldn't need like a 3 foot wide tractor. You may need like a 5 foot wide tractor or something like that. It would just depend on the operation and what they're trying to do with that tractor. Because you also have to take into consideration that with a tractor that small, it's not going to have the most horsepower in the world. It's not going to be able to pull massive rigs behind it that can spray or do all the things it needs to do. It can pretty much just pull the small ones that are used in like vineyard kind of operations anyways. So
Hmm.
the thing with Monarch is that they are such a new company. They've only been around for about 3 years, and they are a fairly small staffed company. So they're rapidly growing, but what we're seeing is kind of the earliest development of what their potential could be. So they're starting off with technology that really benefits the vineyard area, but they're really looking to expand to larger crop operations and more common types of crops like pistachios, like almonds, like walnuts, that kind of stuff, and adapting technology that can fit the bill of what those operations would require.
Yeah, they kept talking about how like driving through tall grass is a challenge.
Yes. Mhm.
But maybe I missed something, but I didn't really understand why. Like that's an added challenge for the tractor.
Well, for one, tall grass kind of can be difficult because it doesn't. It's difficult to see what the terrain's going to look like underneath it. So it could just be another like it's
Uh,
rocky or it's muddy or it's difficult to kind of gauge what the terrain's going to look like. And plus, if it's tall enough, then it might like let's just say the tractor is using some kind of like sensory like scanning feature in the front of it. It might not be able to see properly because of the grass in the way. The grass could get caught up in some of the stuff inside the tractor that might cause some issues. There's a
mm,
variety of reasons the tall grass might be an issue. It just kind of depends on what the tractor's trying to do at the time. But it just with any kind of terrain like that, where there's unpredictability, it's going to cause issues for something that relies on precision, which is
yeah.
like you mentioned earlier, one of the reasons why they struggle so much with tractors versus like autonomous cars, which there is
Hmm.
a bit more of an advantage to producing an autonomous tractor. You're not having to worry about speed limits, so you can kind of make it as bulky as you need to. So there is that you can kind of play around with the opportunity of like, okay, well, we're not going to be on a road, so we can make this thing whatever we need to make it, and it's not going to have to violate any road laws or anything. So there was that advantage, but there are the environmental factors that make it so much harder to account for, just because the environment's unpredictable. It's nearly impossible to
Yeah.
predict everything that the tractor is going to have to deal with at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that'd be a problem for a human driver as well. Like if you're driving
Mm-hmm.
through tall grass, you might run over a rabbit or something that like you just can't tell that it's there.
Right.
And the autonomous tractor is going to have I'd say the same problem in that scenario as a human, with our limited eyes. In fact, in some cases, you might be able to build a sensor that like senses thermal signatures or something that
Yeah.
it's even more advanced than what our eyes could.
Yeah. I know that
Yeah.
Monarch was talking a lot about their integration of precision technology with this tractor, mostly on the agrivoltaic side. They were talking about the precision of like detecting when crops get enough sunlight, and that way they can have the solar panels move to adapt to attract the rest of the sunlight, so that the crops aren't getting oversaturated. So like
Mm.
that kind of precision agriculture is definitely useful, but I could definitely see further down the line some kind of advancement to have tractors that can detect heat signatures, so that way they can avoid hurting any animals that might be in the way, or they might be able to detect like moisture levels in the soil. That way they know, okay, well, this area is too muddy, the tractor is going to get stuck over here, or like
Hmm.
I could definitely see that becoming a possibility. As far as I know, that's not what they're working on right now, but like I said, they're still very early in development with this technology. It could be just a couple of years and they can have that kind of stuff fully planned out.
Yeah, one of the benefits is it doesn't have to go as fast as like I don't know what the top speed of one of these tractors would be, but it doesn't seem like there's any need for it to go more than I don't know 10, 15 miles an hour,
Yeah.
which is, that just generally makes it a little bit safer too. Because I was thinking about, they were talking about its ability to detect when humans or animals are nearby, so it doesn't run them over.
Mhm.
And they kind of demonstrated that where it was behind this person that was walking, and it had this green light that like eventually got too close and it turned red and it just stopped entirely. And I was thinking about how like that's great. That's very comforting that it has that, but
Mhm.
that's also another failure point where there is no way we're taking humans out of the equation, because at some point your tractor is going to detect something it thinks is a person. It's going to stop moving. It's going to refuse to move. It will not do its job. And you have to go out there and deal with it and tell the tractor that's not a person. In some way, you have to like deal with
Right.
it, interact with it, correct the issue,
Mhm.
and let it get on with its work, with its um, and that is of course technology that can improve. But I think we're at a point where like that's going to be one of the challenges, like
Mhm.
failure points that are built into it for safety, and good, and thank goodness we're doing that. But
Yeah.
that also does increase the probability of it not functioning 100% the way we want it to all the time.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, it's always ironic. People are like, "Oh yeah, let's as we automate things, things will get more efficient because robots don't make the same mistakes humans do." And in reality,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the case. I mean, robots make the same mistakes humans do all the time. Because for one, our brains function very similarly to how a computer's brain works, and if it's not something we recognize, it's going to be difficult for us to function properly. Same goes
Mm-hmm.
for for a computer. If it doesn't recognize something, it's not going to function to its code properly. I mean,
Yep. Or it
my
could be so focused on one task that it misses something right in front of it.
Right, exactly. I mean, like my phone, has a Face ID scanner on it, so it's supposed to be able to identify my face. That's how it unlocks. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at my phone and it hasn't recognized me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that there's anything flawed with the technology. It's just that there's always a margin of error when it comes to any kind of precision or detection type technology, just because that's just how it is. It can
Mm-hmm.
never be perfect because things are going to be, dynamic. The environment is never going to be consistent enough that it's going to have the right answer every single time. So you're absolutely right. There's going to be some issues along the line with that kind of stuff that's going to have to be mitigated to some degree by the human operator. And I think that's in my opinion, a good thing. It gives us some level of control over the operation without having the risk of people being like, well, they're it's all just you're sitting back running an RC car. Basically, you're not actually doing anything. It's like, well, no, if he's not there, that tractor is going to hit something that it really does not need to hit. So you
Mm-hmm.
need to have somebody there monitoring it, making sure it's not doing anything wrong. And that way, if the tractor doesn't pick up on something and the human sees it, they can just hit the stop button and boom, they're able to stop any potential casualties.
And they were talking about how they implement things like gesture controls into
Mm-hmm.
it so that a sensor is sort of monitoring you. And I did, again, I wouldn't have thought about this unless I watched this video. Like a farmer driving a tractor for hours and hours and hours, their arms are going to get tired from like dealing with rough terrain and
Mm-hmm.
just trying to hold the wheel steady, so like to keep it on a straight and narrow path for hours and hours. Like that takes a lot of physical effort.
Mm-hmm.
And so they talked about like how there's a human cost to that, there's a physical cost to that, and you're going to get tired and fatigued and having. So I thought this, like, the fact that they thought about that and they implemented these gesture based controls into it where you could just move your arm a certain way and the tractor goes that way,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know, there's probably a lot of other cool things that you can control it doing. The other side of that is it makes farming more accessible,
Mm-hmm.
because somebody that previously could not physically drive a car for whatever reason or operate a vehicle for whatever reason would be able to do this job now, because it's gesture based. It doesn't require that physical upper body strength or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. It just requires you to know these gestures and know how to interact with this piece of technology.
Yeah, definitely. And that, you bring up a great point. Now that opens up the opportunity for people to work in this field that typically wouldn't have had that access. It kind of expands our market a little bit more as well. It kind of, connects us with people who typically may not have even had an interest in what we're doing, but they're like, oh, you're gonna let me drive a tractor when I can't even properly drive a car, then I'm all for that. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to that's interesting perspective I hadn't really thought about before. But no, that's really cool. I mean, one of the things I'm excited about with this tractor is that it just adds so much potential for customization, to agricultural operations. You have, like you mentioned, you have so much more opportunity for different types of people to be able to operate this thing. You have so much opportunity for different types of integrations of this technology with other technologies. Like self-driving tractors are going to be mostly used on crop operations, but I could see them being introduced on like the animal scale as well. Maybe you even have like a small version of a tractor, like some kind of drone or something like that, that just drives through a lane and can scan all of the cow fitbits on the way to the milk barn and gets all the information for you. Um, it seems like there's a lot of potential for expansion here, which is again, why, going way back to the beginning of the episode, I called this a revolution, in agriculture, because it does something that we typically would not believe was possible in agriculture. It makes things so much more efficient and so much more effective that we can focus on other issues now. We can put our energy towards other things that we need to solve on the farm.
One thing they mentioned is that the tractors, like modern tractors now, need to be heavy. And they said that, like, this being an electric tractor, you would assume it's lighter, but the battery's really big. And I think that they assumed that, like, anybody watching the video would understand or know that without explanation. But I'm a city boy. Why does a tractor need to be heavy?
Mostly for the terrain issues, like I mentioned earlier. If a light vehicle is going over this like bumpy terrain, it's probably gonna get knocked around a lot. There's probably gonna be some issues involved.
It might flip over.
It might flip over. It might, like there could be a lot of issues with the center of gravity on it. So mostly for stability reasons, and also if it's going to be pulling a trailer of some kind, so if it's going to be pulling like a spray rig, or if it's going to be pulling something that's going to need to be going through these fields, it needs to have a certain amount of weight to it just so it can pull this thing. Because if it's too light, it's not going to be able to muster up the horsepower to really get this thing moving at all. So it's more so for structure and for security, to make sure it can properly do its job. It's not so much like there's not like a weight limit for it to be considered a tractor or anything like that. It's more so the proper functionality of the vehicle.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same reason why like a truck is more desirable to pull a trailer than like a Prius, for example.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So
do you think yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say hopefully that kind of clears that up.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you think like, what do you think is like the minimum amount of I don't even know the right way to word this question, but like how big does your operation need to be before you would need one of these tractors?
That's really hard to say. I think it would depend. My kind of go-to answer with anything in agriculture is it depends. So that's kind of
right.
But with this kind of technology, it could definitely, hold on. Sorry, I had a cold like 2 weeks ago, and it's gone now, but like the congestion is still there, so it's kind of annoying. But anyways,
Yeah.
With this kind of technology, it would heavily depend on, for one, the amount of employees you have in that operation, and also what the operation is. So like for a crop that's really easy to manage, like corn, probably wouldn't need it necessarily, because corn is pretty easy to harvest. It's pretty easy to grow. You don't really need someone to pull a tractor through there 24/7 to spray it or check on it. It's kind of just pretty good on its own. If you have just a few employees, you can get that done pretty easily. Whereas like like an orchard, like trees, or like a vineyard, a little bit more maintenance to be done in that kind of operation. It requires a bit more care. So maybe if you had a bit of a shortage on employees, you might need a tractor for that, but, or one of these kind of tractors for that. But it's difficult to say like what size it would have to be to require this kind of thing, because it's not so much the size of the operation, it's more so the size of your team to be able to functionally do this. Because of the price, I would say that it would be a wise choice for most kind of moderate sized operations, and moderate size can vary depending on the area of the country that you're from. But like I would say anything over like 100 acres, I would probably go with this kind of technology. But again, that depends on what you're growing. I like 100 acres of corn and 100 acres of walnuts are two very different types of operations. So they're going to require very
Mm,
different types of technology. So that's kind of a hard question to answer because it's so situational.
okay. Um, I think I only had one more question,
Okay.
which is, does it concern you at all that the name of this company is the same name of the evil corporation from Godzilla, Monarch?
I actually hadn't even considered that, but now that you mention it, no, I mean the Monarch is a great company. I've actually spoken to them a little bit about this technology, so I got to kind of get some insight into into their minds, which is really cool. They're a fantastic company, so I'm very excited to see where the future of their ideas go. I think that they're kind of the first stepping stone in a long chain of new innovations in agriculture that are going to ultimately make food better for us and make farming easier for the producer. So no, I think that there's a lot of, is there potential for this to go horribly, horribly wrong? Sure, that happens with anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I have faith that that's actually a question that I always ask. I guess when it comes to technology too, is like, are you fearful of this? Is this an issue that like,
Mm.
do you think this is going to cause some issues down the line? And more often than not, people are like, no, technology is a good thing. Like this is going to be a good thing in the long run. And I'm pretty much on the same boat.
I think it's going to be a good thing. I mean, there's always the possibility of this fleet of tractors combining into a Megazord and becoming like Mecha Godzilla, and that's been Monarch's goal this whole entire time. But that's highly unlikely.
If that happens,
And
that's the way I want to go.
honestly, yeah, it'd be cool. It'd be the most rock and roll way to die. I'd be grateful for the opportunity to see it.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I do think everything that they're doing is really cool, and like I like their head seems to be in the right place. They talked a lot about solar technology. They
Mhm.
talked a lot about like gas emissions, and I do think that solar technology is something that we all need to be focused on, whether you're in
Mhm.
agriculture or not. It's just something that like it's so the benefits are so obvious,
Mhm.
and the negatives are so hard to find when you're making a list of the pros and cons of solar energy.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just think it's something that we all need to be steering towards that technological future. And I
Yeah.
like that this is something that well, it's not solar powered, but like I could see a version of this tractor that in the future that like gets and it has a solar panel on top of it,
Hmm.
and while it's out in the field, it's just recharging itself as it's driving.
Yeah.
Or so maybe that might be decades down the line in advancement, but I think it's probably something that they're probably one of their goals is to
Mm.
make this thing as energy efficient as possible, right?
Yeah, that is something that they're actually working on right now, is trying to find a way to make it
Hmm.
more energy efficient, and actually providing the ability for it to have some kind of solar rechargeability as it's driving. And it wouldn't necessarily make it completely energy efficient in the sense that it could just run forever off of that solar panel, but at least put some level of efficiency on the battery, so it's not running out every whatever, I think it was like 10 hours it runs. Maybe it could run for 12
Yeah.
or 15 now, or whatever it was. Um so yeah, that is definitely an advancement in the future that they're trying to work on. And I agree with you, solar is a big thing that is definitely important to put a lot of our eggs, that's a basket I think we should put a lot of our eggs into. And it's something that is becoming more and more popular in the agricultural sphere, so I'm hoping that kind of sees its way into the urban side as well. Just because it is, there are so many advantages to it, like you mentioned. And I mean, it kind of, goes back to my original statement about this whole automation revolution. It really, the benefits to this are so, you know, so clear, because this new technology is beneficial for the environment, is beneficial for our relationship with with the environment, and also with the consumer. It creates such this healthy bond. Again, symbiosis. It all goes back to that.
Hmm.
Everything has to work together for this to work properly. And I think this is one of the best ideas we've had to kind of make strides towards that potential. um I don't know, maybe I'm a little too optimistic because I really like tech, but that does seem to be kind of the case. I think that we're heading down the right path.
Hmm. Well, I think more as time moves on, like the younger generations that are getting into or taking over these industries are taking the things that they've learned, with them into them.
Hmm.
So like a lot of younger people are a young mind is going to be more receptive to the idea of an advancement in technology like solar power. So
Hmm.
if they're going to grow up like learning about all the benefits that has, and then they end up going into farming, they're going to bring that knowledge and that level of thought and intelligence into it, and they're going to change the industry. So
No, absolutely. And that's a big, we're having a really hard time right now getting younger generations involved in agriculture. And I think that the integration of technology is going to be one of the biggest things we're going to be able to use to properly
mhm.
get them to find an interest in it finally.
Yep.
So I
Cool.
actually have some questions for you before we close out.
All right.
So the first one, what kind of, so if you were to like invent your own agricultural technology, what would you want to see in the industry?
Ooh. So something that is something that like replaces a current piece of technology,
Sure,
or
it could be that. It could be an addition to a current technology. It could be something completely out of left field. Like something that like a treadmill for cows or something like that. Just something like completely like it could be whatever something you think is practical, something you think would just be kind of fun, or something that's kind of cool. Whatever you think, would be an interesting thing to see.
hmm. Okay. What about like what I'm sure that there are I'm sure that there are farms in like parts of the country or parts of the world where like the weather's not that great, and the cows like maybe have to be cold for part of the day, or they have to be exposed to unpleasant weather like rain or something like that for part of the day. um so something something that would allow them to stay indoors when the weather's not good, maybe like something that I feel like I'm just talking about like a tarp, or
Like a barn.
like a barn, a barn. Um, but maybe I don't know. Maybe something that has like the ability, like a roof that can retract, so that this is a bad one. I want a different one. I want to come up with a better one.
Okay. No, I mean
um,
that's an interesting idea, like an adaptive barn almost that can like open up when it's sunny outside, give them some chance to breathe a little bit, and then if it starts getting too cold or if it starts raining or whatever, it can close up and contain them. That'd be kind of an interesting
yeah,
idea.
yeah, because I think about like a like cattle farm or like a dairy farm where they're all, I've just seen like the Mister Rogers version of it where they're all just
Mm.
sort of lined up in these pens and they seem to be hooked up to things, and it seems like they don't have a lot of space to move around in. And so I'm sure part of their day is that, but then part of like after that they get let out in a field to walk around or something.
Hmm.
But that part of the day where they're like confined in a really small pen and are just hooked up to a thing, like maybe milking them for several hours or whatever. um that can't be super pleasant, and that's got to be really boring. So maybe some sort of like screen that they can view that makes it like a virtual field that they're looking at, and they think that they're out in the field, and you can adjust um the sounds and the weather conditions inside of it so it feels like they're outside. Maybe just like VR headset for the cows.
I love that. I mean,
Yeah.
as I'm sure you've learned by now, cows are my favorite. I'm a big fan of
Mm.
cows. So anything that would make a cow's life better, I am all for. So VR cow headsets, I like it. You have to probably have to adapt it so that way it can fit around their, because their eyes are on the side of their heads. You probably have to adapt it to their head size, but that would be, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, give them a nice pasture to graze in while they're, you just see them milking. They just like start, bending down, trying to bite the ground. Um,
Yeah, there's some drawbacks to this idea. I don't want to trick the poor cows.
Yeah, but I think that's a lot of fun. I like that idea. Some kind of like
Mm.
adaptive environment for cows, I think would be, or just for livestock in general, something that can kind of give them a little bit more, change of scenery, from what they usually see.
Yeah, because ultimately the goal is we want to have cows in space, and this is the only way we're going to be able to do it is that we can recreate some sort of virtual environment for them while they're hurtling through the dark void of space
Exactly.
in a
Yeah.
ship.
Yeah. How else are we
Yeah,
gonna
they
get a cow
gotta
over the moon? I mean,
exactly.
no,
Yep.
I love it. So moving on to my next question. Out of all the stuff we talked about, all the different types of technology, the stuff that we talked about with Monarch, the revolution as a whole. What was your favorite thing that you either learned about or something you already knew, something that you brought up? What was your most excitable point in this whole talk?
That's an easy one. It's the idea of the solar panel that like during the day it's just collecting energy from the sun and everything. But it's also like it. I mean, it's kind of the retractable barn thing. Like it's retractable in a way where there are crops that need sunlight in the morning, and so the panels can go up and let the sun, let photosynthesis happen, and then they at like noon when the sun is too hot and it would bake the plants or evaporate them, the panels go down, and so it's providing shade but also collecting solar energy. I just love the idea of that and the efficiency and the multi-purposeness of it, and I just think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. The whole study of agrivoltaics is getting so advanced and it's so interesting to see. We're gonna see stuff like that advance like way more down the line, but we're gonna see a lot of new integrations of that kind of technology as we progress as an industry. So I would agree with you. That's definitely a really cool part to see.
Nice.
And then finally, did the video or our talk today, or just the introduction to all this new technology, did this change your perspective of how agriculture operates?
Yes, it did. Yeah, like I said, I was picturing like a Wally with articulated arms or something, literally picking apples off of a tree and throwing them into the back of its loader. Um, and so this helped me look at what are the more realistic advancements that we're making, where are we currently, and what are the things that are impressive and cool that I wasn't thinking about. So this definitely it made me more plugged in and a little more grounded and a little more like realistic about technology and agriculture, and I appreciate that I got that update on my current notions.
Nice. Yeah. I wanted to fill you in when you mentioned Wally. Again, I just remembered. There's actually a company that I think you're going to want to look up because they're kind of fun. It's called the Small Robot Company. They're an agricultural based company. They produce robots that are used in fields, and the robots all do different things. You have they all have names. One's Tom, I think. One's Richard. One's Wilma. Like they all have like little personalities and stuff. And like Wilma's like the operator. She runs the whole operation. And like Tom and Richard, they go out there and kind of spray, or they go collect information, or they go water. They do whatever they got to do. But it kind of like that's like the earliest steps towards like that Wally idea. If you have like a little robot who has a fun personality that goes out there and kind of does the work in the field. And the whole reason that they decided to name them and call themselves a small robot company is because they wanted to be more approachable for like consumers. They wanted like the average person to trust, that we have robotics and technology in agriculture that's not dangerous and it's not going to, hurt you. It's all good stuff. So we don't have Wally right now, but we're actually not as far away as you think it from what it seems like.
Yeah, I'm looking at Tom right now on their website. Tom is cute.
Yeah,
He doesn't
he's
have a
cool.
little face or anything, but he's cute.
Yeah. So it adds some level of personality, some level of relatability. So that way, like if they got big enough, like they could be driving down the street and some kid in a car could be like, hey, that's Tom. He's a small robot. Like just kind of like a fun little thing like that. Um, so yeah, that you reminded me of that. I was gonna bring that up earlier. I completely forgot. But yeah, so small robot company. I've shouted them out before. I'll shout them out again. I shout them out again because I think they're doing great stuff over there, and they're kind of a really cool idea. Um, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting world to live in right now as we see advancements in this technology and as we see the progression towards a more automated future. Um, and as much as I would love to have Wally in the ag world, it's probably going to be a little while before we get to that level, but we're still getting to see some pretty incredible stuff. I mean, stuff that I never imagined I would see in my lifetime is very much, happening right before our eyes. So it's kind of a cool place to live right now.
It is cool. It's very cool.
Yeah. So that kind of wraps up all my questions. I don't know if you have any other closing thoughts, but if not, then I'll just kind of let you remind everybody where they can find you, and go ahead and plug all your stuff, and just let everyone know who you are once again.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again for having me on today. This was really fun and very educational for me. So I really appreciate that you invited me to talk about this topic with you. Yeah, I'm Lou. I again have a podcast called Robots versus Dinosaurs, and Brennan has been a guest on that show. So you can go back and check out our episode where we talked about Wall-E, and we really went into like a lot of the future of technology and how accurate that movie might be from a speculative standpoint. So you can check out our conversation on that. And I have like over 80 other episodes at this point. I've been doing the podcast for a little over a year, and so there's a lot of movies that we've covered, a lot of TV shows that we've covered. So if you like robots and you like dinosaurs and you like sci-fi in general, you should check out my podcast.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll put all the links down in the description. Definitely would recommend you guys go check it out if you're into robots or dinosaurs, or if you're just a science nerd like Lou and I here. So it's just a very fun podcast to go listen in on and just kind of get a good kind of gets your brain tingling a little bit, gets you thinking about some things that you typically wouldn't think about on your average day. But it's a whole lot of fun. I definitely enjoy being a guest on there. So I'll put the links down in the description so you guys can go check out Lou's show. Thanks again for joining me for this episode. It was a lot of fun. I hope you had a pretty good time talking about all the different robots and technology that we're doing today in our farming world. But yeah, I think that kind of wraps things up on my end. So thanks again, Lou, for being a great guest. Thanks to all listeners for tuning in and for all your support over all these episodes we've been doing for the past three and a half years. Man, that's crazy to think about. But yeah, thank you all again. Thank you. Yeah, we're coming up on 4 in April, so it's going to be a fun time. But thanks again to all listeners. I'll catch you all next week. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.